Good morning, rock stars. Okay, I need to update this. Hold on, we gotta adjust things. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome back to the Perfect Fit Quilt Along. I am adjusting camera angles and plugging in the iron and doing all the things. Y'all, it is so cold here in Georgia. We are having yet another week of just frozen temperatures. All right, one more adjustment. Hang tight. Good morning, everyone. Hello, Helen. I see all of y'all. Okay. Hopefully we're good now. I'm going to do my best to be able to read y'all's comments. Nope, that is still crooked. I'm trying to get this camera level. One more check. There we go. That's a little better. Hello, Sandy. Hello, Jan. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Ta-da! And many thanks to all of you who sent me lovely comments and emails and all the things yesterday. We've had some real stuff around here lately, right? We've had some real serious conversations over the last couple of months. And I appreciate y'all staying the course. It is hard to have difficult community conversations about current events, about what's going on in the world. And I appreciate y'all letting me be a whole human and talk openly. And I appreciate y'all showing up to sew and create and be joyful with me, because that's what we're here to do today. And I'm just stoked. I'm excited to see this fabric come together. Let's be honest. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Hello, Kyle and Susan and Francie Joe. Shall we start sewing? All right. Today we are beginning the process of putting together our blocks for Perfect Fit. Ta-da! Here's the thing about Perfect Fit. Oh, big giant asterisk. Many of you received and appropriately emailed me. I got to scroll down all these comments again. Instagram Live does not make this easy sometimes. Our email on Monday was all about quarter square triangles. There are not any quarter square triangles in the Perfect Fit quilt. So if you received that email and thought either Holly Ann's losing it or I am, that was a fair concern. We have a sequence of emails that we use from Quilt Along to Quilt Along, and they get updated each time, and we missed one. So our apologies for the confusions. I think Clara sent out a correction this morning that had the full resources that you were supposed to have, all about quarter-inch seams, and that's what we're actually working on today. So if you had a moment of panic, thinking that there were quarter square triangles hidden in here somewhere, there's not. You're safe, okay? Let's see. Kyle said, I laid out my string and story fabric and printed my pattern. Huzzah! Hello, William. I'm so glad that you're here to learn all about quarter-inch seams. Hello, Charlotte in Denmark and Helen in Maryland. I'm thrilled to have y'all here. Now, a quarter-inch seam allowance, I'm going to talk through a few tips. I have lots of photos and resources on the blog that we shared in that email. I will make sure that ends up in the caption of these videos, that it is shared on my stories on Instagram and all those good things. But the big deal about a quarter-inch seam is that it's going to be the thing that makes sure all the pieces come out the right size, right? When I do this quilt math for these, because I have planned it, it's an interesting, did my clip just break? Huh. When I plan the math for these strips, right, I plan that as they come together in the pattern, that we're losing a ½ inch on each side because quarter-inch seam allowances. So making sure that what we're taking off, essentially what's getting lost in those seams, is as planned, is what's going to make the pieces come out even. It's going to be what helps them fit together. Now, today, like I said, we're going to talk through some tips for that quarter-inch seam allowance. We're also going to talk through laying out and putting together your first block. This quilt consists of an interesting factor because there is a block that is repeated many, many times. We're actually going to make 22 of them if you're making the throw size block or throw size quilt with me. But then there are partial blocks, because if you take the Perfect Fit block and you just line them up, boop, 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 your pattern will not be lined up with itself. So you have to actually offset the blocks. Don't worry, we're going to do that process together in a couple of weeks with my big design wall at home, okay? But right now we're going to focus on those complete blocks. Next week we'll talk about the partial blocks. And I know that reading those directions in the pattern can feel a little like, whoa, I take what piece and I put what where. We're going to do that together, okay? Does that sound like a good plan? Any questions thus far? about the things. Kyle says, is that a Peloton Christmas sweater? Yes, it is. It says "Together We Go Far" and has the Peloton logo on it because I have drunk that Kool-Aid. We all have the Kool-Aids that we have consumed, right? Peloton is one of mine. They actually had another design that I like slightly better, but it only came in like a cream sweatshirt, and I was like, that will not do. It'll get too dirty. Let's see. Oh, my dear Instagrammers, I'm sorry. I cannot see your comments because some sort of pop-up came up. Okay, I did not miss anything. That's important. All right, let's start by talking about laying out these blocks. And I am going to very carefully actually just scoop my sewing machine. Oh, it's so heavy. Off to the side. This is the Burnett BO8 straight stitch sewing machine, and it is a big chunk of metal. We love it. And I love getting to sew on it together, but moving it is a whole thing. All right. We're going to start by talking about how we're going to lay out these blocks. Now, I encourage you, have your pattern handy. I am going to try to lay this out in front of me so that it is facing you the proper direction. Now, my Instagram folks, I have my front camera on. So that's so I can see your comments as I am live. That means that your image is reversed. So if you're like, what Helene is laying out and what I'm seeing in the pattern are mirror images, that's why. If that's confusing to you when you're assembling your blocks, go catch the replay over on YouTube. I don't anticipate that to be a problem over there. I'm now looking at YouTube and I'm like, YouTube might also be reversed because I'm also using a front camera. Interesting. Maybe we'll lay it out and then maybe I'll rearrange it so it's mirror image so it looks the right way. We'll figure it out together. Y'all can let me know as we go along. Denise says, I'm catching the first part as I head out to teach. I'm excited about mastering the 1/4 inch. Yes, Denise, I hope that this will be helpful today. All right, so let's start by laying out our pattern so that y'all understand how to interpret all of these diagrams. And then as we start to sew, I will talk through the 1/4 inch seam. First up, at the top of the page, it's going to tell you what pieces you need in order to make this block. This will also be true when you get over into the pages that talk about all the partial blocks. The first thing it will list is all the pieces you're going to need, okay? This is for a couple of reasons. One, so you can kind of gather them and know you've got all the right bits and bobs. But also, if you are human like me, and there's always that one piece that you like don't cut enough of, that, you know, because you miscounted while you were cutting, and like, hopefully this won't be us this time, but it was definitely me last time I made this pattern. You can catch it early and not panic yourself, okay? All right, so the other thing that I'm going to recommend with that is even though it's listed right at the top, I would keep the labels on the pieces until they're all laid out. So like I wouldn't necessarily like take them all out of your clips in your labeling system and have them in a pile and then try to lay out your block. Okay, so we're going to go bit by bit. All right, so we're going to start with A4 and C4. And as you'll see, my clip did break. Okay, well, that's cute. We'll deal with that later. As you'll see, the directions they show the order that you need to sew these together. Like I said, we're going to do that in a moment. I am first going to lay them all out so you can see where we're headed, okay? So A4, C4. Even though you decided on your color palette and all those things, find yourself having to like think really hard about which is which, you're human. Me too. All right, A4, C4, and then we're going to need C1 and B3. C1. C1 and B3. Did I mention that this is the best print in Bird is the Word? Just for the record, this is the best one. I made a whole hoopla about it in the store on Saturday when folks were in here shopping. All right. Remember, I'm trying to do this upside down and backwards and all the things. So bear with me if it takes a second to get it right. All right, next up is going to be C3 and B3. B3. When you do this, right now, I'm going through and I'm doing a single block, right? I'm laying out just one and we're going to piece just one together. But notice that you're going to make 22 of these. So each of these pieces that I'm laying out, I could stack that 22 tall, right? And then I would be able to chain piece my way through these assembly instructions pretty darn quickly. Okay. So just as I would make a block or two so you get a grip for kind of how they come together. I'm going to continue scooting this down so that hopefully y'all can see as much of it as possible. So I would make a block or two so you can get a feel for how they come together. But then you'll be able to start chain piecing and it'll come together really quickly. Okay. All right. Next up. Sorry, I'm just making sure I got it going the right way. C1 and B4. You see why I was really, really specific about making sure that we labeled these last week. That becomes really relevant really quickly. Okay, this side. C1, yep. Okay, B4. Remember seam allowances. So some of these, like it looks like these pieces are too short right now. That's because seam allowances. Ooh, y'all cannot see that whole thing. I will scooch it on down in a minute. Give me just a second. Let's see. If we come back here. All right, here we go. I'm like, let me look at the camera and figure out where y'all are going to be able to see this. Can you see it now? That's definitely better. YouTube, you've got an advantage over Instagram on this one because of where your space is. Let me see Instagram. Let me tip y'all forward. All right, there's that. We're going to hope that that's not cutting off my head too badly over on YouTube. Here we go. There's my Instagrammers. Okay. Here we go. And then let's see, our A3 and C2, no heat. I thought having it at 65 in here would be low enough that that the heat would not kick on, but that tells you just how cold it is outside. All right, I'm gonna lean forward kind of funky so that my head's not cut off over on YouTube. We're just adapting. It's fine. All right. A3. No, A3. And C2. Unit 6, A4, C1, A1. Okay, A4. This goes up at the top. A4, C1. Let's see, that can be a model for quilting in general. We're adapting, it's fine. Yes, exactly. So notice like these pieces are going to come together like this once it's all stitched, but it's hard to see that at the moment. So trust the process. It's going to get there. And then C2 and B4. C2. Oh, good, the heat kicked off. Now that I have it turned down to 63 in here, y'all. B4. I was like, what? All right. Here we are. So this jumble is going to become our block. Okay, does that make sense of like how I kind of went through and laid this out? I'm just following these diagrams. Like I said, this first one is going to be the most confusing. And then you'll see how the pieces come together. And it'll be much easier to make the rest of them. Okay. Now, in order to do this, you can see based on how many pieces are here and all the ways they don't line up, that really gives you a clear visual of why this 1/4 inch seam is going to matter. Because all of these pieces have to coalesce into this block. Okay, and they all have to fit together like a little puzzle. So we're going to scoot all of our pieces over here to the side. And then we're going to start back at the top of these directions and start assembling everything. Okay. There's a few ways you can do this. Inside the pattern, I have it written step by step of like, do this and then add it to this, right? Now, you'll notice there's a number of different subunits. If you want to chain piece all the subunits and then put the block together, that's a great method too, okay? It's a little bit less stop and start. We're probably gonna do that together. Now, when it comes to our 1/4 inch seam, there are two main things I want you to consider. The first is gonna be the foot that is on your machine. Knowing the distance from your needle to the edge of your foot is a wonderful way to get an accurate 1/4 inch seam. Here on the B08, this machine, and I cannot easily pull it off because it takes a screw, comes with a scant 1/4 inch foot. Also in the quilting set, there is a 1/4 inch foot with guide, right? And so that's going to be as simple as I'm lining my fabric up with the edge of the foot and I know it is a 1/4 inch, right? If you were on something like the Bernina B77, that has a standard foot. I can actually show y'all. Will there ever be a day that I teach one of these lives that I'm not like grabbing stuff from all over the store? Probably not. Some of y'all are OGs, and you remember when String and Story was in the bonus room over our garage at our house in Lawrenceville. And y'all know I was always dropping stuff on the floor. I was rummaging through drawers. We've both come a long way, and some things never change, you know? Right? If you're using a foot like this one, right, this is going to be a pretty standard zigzag sole foot that comes on most machines, right? In this case, where this plastic, how am I going to show this to y'all? Where the plastic meets the metal, right here, is a 1/4 inch. Also with this foot, you would have the option on your machine that you could actually scoot your needle to the right a few notches so that the distance from the needle to the edge of the foot is a 1/4 inch, okay? So using your foot for your 1/4 inch measurement is a great way, great reference, my personal favorite way to do it, okay? Something that you can do instead of or in conjunction with that is to simply put a piece of washi tape on the bed of your machine, right? Most of our machines have markers. Even this B08, it's got a 1/4 inch marker on there, but that's going to be hard to see when I'm feeding a lot of stuff through the machine quickly. So getting a brightly colored piece of paper tape, measuring where from the needle to a line is going to be that 1/4 inch and putting a piece of tape down is going to be key. Practice is going to make progress on your 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like it does with anything else. Now, personally, I tend to err towards a scant 1/4 inch. That's where I like to hover, especially when I'm working here on the B08. It makes it so easy with the foot that comes with the machine. But I also have my friend Kate who likes to talk about what we call your personal private measurement, okay? The PPM. And what she likes to drive home when she talks about the personal private measurement is that just like our handwriting, it is normal, even though it is a measurement, it is normal for everyone's 1/4 inch to maybe be a little bit different, right? The biggest thing is going to be consistency. Because here's the thing. When you're putting together Perfect Fit or any other quilt pattern, in order for the quilts to come out, for the blocks to come out and the quilt top to come out exactly as I have prescribed it per the mathy maths, right? You need to have a perfect 1/4 inch seam. Now, if your 1/4 inch seam allowance, because some of y'all just went at the word perfect, don't worry, it's okay. If your 1/4 inch seam allowance is a thread wider or a thread narrower than a 1/4 inch, as long as you're consistent, your quilt will still turn out. It might be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller at the end of the day, but even things like your points will come out as long as you are consistent. So stress less about what is the perfect scant quarter-inch seam that I must achieve without fail every single time, and instead focus on figuring out which method is going to give you the most consistent result, okay? The other little asterisk that I will add here, and this may or may not apply to you, I know that I live in a little bit of an unusual situation that I very frequently am sewing on one machine, the B08 here in the store. I sew on another machine, the B77 at home. But if you are someone that maybe you have your regular machine, but you also go to your sew group pretty often and you take a different machine when you go do that, make sure that you have figured out a method of your quarter-inch seam allowance that it's going to come out the same on both machines. Otherwise, if you are switching back and forth between machines within the same project, you're going to get irregular results, okay? Things to keep in mind. Any questions about the quarter-inch seam allowance or any of the methods that I referenced so far today? Fire away if you have them. While you are firing away, I'm going to start assembling. Why do I struggle with that word so much? Assembling this block, right? We're going to go all the way back to A4 and C4 as described. And y'all, you know, I'm not a big pinner. If you were with us last year when I did the, do I have a scrap? I want a leader. This will do. If you were with us when we did the Lanterns of Hope quilt along last year, then you know that on those I did tend to pin. Those were 15.5-inch long strips, those big long ones. And for the sake of accuracy, I definitely pinned those. These are short enough that y'all, the chances of me pinning them are pretty low. Okay. Okay, I don't see any questions. Perfect. All right. Fire away if you have them. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't pin. I'm just acknowledging that that's a choice that I've made. The other thing that's very helpful, and this probably goes without saying, but just in case it doesn't, make sure you set your machine to end with the needle down. It will make your life so much easier at every step of everything. All right, so that's going to be my first unit. I'm going to go ahead and make unit 2 with C1 and B3 as well. Like I said, I like to chain piece a whole bunch of these units together. And then we'll assemble the block. I find that it just goes a little smoother that way. Okay, so those are going to get joined together in a second. Unit 3 is going to be C3 and B3. That's these guys. These sound like they could be droid names, you know? Did have a question that got asked. I had a couple of questions that got asked last week that I promised that I would try to answer this week while I was sewing. So I'm going to attempt to do that. Okay, hold on. Where did that piece go? Unit 4, C1 and B. Nope, that one goes that way. Did I miss C1 and B4, y'all? I might have. Cool. We're going to pull it out. C1 and B4. This is why I lay everything out and then I check it again while I'm working on it. Because it's a lot of pieces. It's a lot of moving parts. And I'm multitasking. So that's also playing into this. Couple of questions that I got asked in my DMs last week that I mentioned that I said I would try to answer today. One, where did the perfect fit pattern come from? And this is a fabulous question. So Hubster and I used to go to this big old church that's not too far from where we live. And it's where I grew up. We were there for years. And they would do these very cool slide backgrounds. Like genuinely, all right, A3 and A3, C2. Okay. That is an extra piece. They would do these very cool slide backgrounds every morning. I don't know who the graphic designer was on staff that would design them, but they did a lot of stuff that honestly could have been really great quilts. I found it very inspiring, and inevitably ended up doodling quilts while sitting in church, as one does. And Perfect Fit was one of those, that they had this slide background that I don't think it was exactly like this. Obviously I haven't seen it in 10 years at this point, because they would only use these for a few weeks at a time. But it was this idea of like interlocking shapes. So I sat there one Sunday and doodled kind of this idea. And what was interesting about this is even though I drew it, I could not figure out the pattern repeat to save my life. Like I stared and stared and stared at this pattern and finally took it to Hubster, because Hubster was an engineering major when he first started school, changed majors later, another long story. But he started out as an engineering major. So he very much has that brain, right? And he loves a good like doodle on graph paper moment. So I brought him kind of the start of this Perfect Fit design. And I was like, that slide was really cool. I'm trying to do something kind of like it, but I want to figure out how it can actually be pieced as a quilt, not just drawn as a picture. I cannot figure out the pattern repeat. And it was actually Hubster who figured out the pattern repeat and how to offset these blocks, and then had the idea of using those partial blocks. So shout out to Hubster. He was a vital part of this quilt pattern. But that's where Perfect Fit came from. All right, down to this one. Maybe my piece just got like dragged off. I don't know. We're going to figure it out together. It'll be fine. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit more about pressing next week, but I'm going to touch on this as I start to press these pieces that we're going to then turn around and sew together. Oh, I just sewed it twice. I'm silly. That's okay. We'll have another one for the next piece. All right. We're going to talk about pressing more next week, but I want to touch on this now. You'll notice I did not include pressing directions in this. There's not a whole lot of seams that interlock with each other in a way that is going to make that vital, right? But when you press, do press to the side. It's going to make your seams stronger. And I know y'all cannot fully see what I'm doing here, but what I like to do is I actually take my iron and with the seam still closed, like this, I press it, right? Then I'm going to take my fingers and open the fabric like so, and very gently finger press that, okay? I do this with my hands because there's not heat coming from my fingers, right? So I'm not likely to distort the fabric a whole lot, but having hit it with the iron has softened those fibers so that I can get that seam all the way open, and then I can press it with the iron, right? If I just nudge it open with the iron and push, right? Two things are at risk of happening. One, I may not get that seam all the way open and I might end up with extra fabric there, and that's going to cause distortions and issues later. Two, if I nudge it open with the iron and then make that sweeping motion, I run the risk of distorting this fabric so that it's no longer a nice, pretty warp and weft on grain situation, okay? So I want to do that bit of manipulation more with my hand than with the iron, and stick to more of a pressing motion with the iron rather than an ironing motion, okay? All right, we're going to repeat that for all of these bits, and we're going to lay it back out to see if I indeed sewed two. Y'all know there's always a risk of something along those lines when I am talking and sewing and doing all the things. All right, this is those two. This is C3 and B3. And I need to add the A2 over to the side of them. So we're going to do that real quick. And that will help with the layout. My needle came unthreaded. Cute. I have made this pattern and figured out a method of assembly that makes sense to my brain, right? And that's what I am showing y'all today, that it involves a lot of chain piecing, a lot of assemble the parts, lay them back out, and then put them back together. That may not be the way that makes the most sense to your brain, okay? So like when I go to make my other 21 blocks, I will probably sew 21 sets of these together, 21 sets of these together, and do all of that first so that all of these little units that I referenced in the pattern layout are together, and then I'll assemble the block. If you find it easier to truly go step by step the way that I have laid it out in the pattern, that's why I laid it out that way. It is a lot of pieces coming together in a very specific order. And if you want to keep it super simple and just go exactly in the order. No, we came unthreaded way back there. Okay. And if you just want to keep it exactly in the order that is written, that is a-okay. All right. All right, y'all are quiet today. Anybody got any questions, points of chatter, exciting things that happened while you were working on your perfect fit? Look at that. You can start to see those pieces come together. It's so exciting. All right, C1 and B4, we got that right here. And it is going to join with, yeah, I think I said 2 of these. The reason that I like to put all of the, I like to assemble all the partial bits before assembling the block is because of all this back and forth ironing. So otherwise you're going to end up jumping up to iron a whole bunch, which if you've got an ironing station adjacent to you like I do right now, that may not be a big deal. You may be like, let me sew one seam and then iron, sew another seam and then iron. That's less confusing. But once you get the feel for it, if you can do some chain piecing to put everything together, it will save some steps, save some broken thread, all those good things. Make sure that my seam is going the correct way that I pressed it. This is that unit from back here that has one more piece. Notice I've been using it as a little bit of a leader and ender, so that I'm not having to cut my threads under my machine a whole lot. Okay. Y'all. Okay, let me make sure I've got the pieces going in the right places. Yep, right here. Ta-da! We've got one more that goes underneath. Oh, that's what I did. Okay. I was missing the long one, or I missed this shorter one, I think. And then these can go together. And then I'll break some threads. Oh, here, I see questions. Let's see. Kyle says, I disagree with you on very few things, but I'm a pressing seams open kind of guy. You know what, Kyle? I am very comfortable with us disagreeing on that. That is a-okay. I don't like pressing seams open for 2 reasons. Well, it's sort of 3 reasons, but 2 of them are, a Venn diagram. So reason number 1 is that I am very bad at pressing my seams open without burning my fingers, and I don't like burning my fingers. So some of this is like raw self-preservation, okay? The other reason is that my quilts in progress tend to get handled a lot. Sometimes I'm not the only one working on piecing a project. Sometimes several of us are working on it here in the shop. Also, I tend to carry projects back and forth from here to my sewing station at home and back. So if I press my seams open, I run the risk of those seams splitting just by the amount of handling and movement that my projects endure. That admittedly is an extremely special circumstance. The other thing is that because of the dense quilting that I like to do and lots of stitch in the ditch, those seams, when they're folded over and pressed, they're more secure. They're going to be more durable over time. You're less likely to end up with any kind of splitting or anything during the long run process. So personal preference. But like I said, I'm very comfortable with us disagreeing on that one. Susan says, I started piecing Perfect Fit this morning, but now as I'm watching you, I'm quilting a quilt for my daughter's boyfriend. You know me, so many projects going all the time. I love that, Susan. And Denise says, what I'm hearing is make a model, then chain piece. Yes, Denise, that's a perfect summary. So go through this, make one so you know what the heck is going on, because it's a lot. And then you'll be able to set yourself up to chain piece this whole thing together. And that's where it's going to get really fast. Like the first block or two, I mean, we've been sitting here for what, 36 minutes? And we are not done with the first block yet. They're not all going to take this long. If you're like me and you're one of those people that you're like, okay, block one took me 30 minutes and there are 22 blocks. So, oh my gosh, that's going to be 11 hours. It's not going to be. Okay. It's going to come together so much faster than that. Because once you understand how the blocks come together and you can set yourself up by just being a chain piecing machine, it will be so quick and easy. All right. And I think that goes that way, but let's double check. Nope, it goes this way. Okay, bear with me for a second. I'm gonna weirdly turn around and look down because I'm putting this together upside down. I don't want to mess it up. Okay, we've got. Oh yeah, because that's gonna come over there like that. Okay. I think we're good. All right. Moment of truth. Let's put this puppy together, shall we? Kyle says, all valuable reasons. I love that you both said droids and Venn diagram today. That's why we're friends. Listen, the nerd energy is strong with me. It's very, very strong. That I feel like that is a part of my personality that shines through in teaching in odd ways. It shows up a lot in the analogies that I come up with. I come up with very specific and sometimes unusual analogies. The vocabulary, and then also, you know, the fun facts that will spew forth out of me. But yeah, I read voraciously and have a lot of funky things in my brain to share. Good morning, Debbie. It is good to see you. You know, I could be using the little leader that I went all the way over there to go get. So a little leader like this, y'all, is just so that I don't have to cut thread and run the risk of my needle coming unthreaded, the extra thread that's involved in that, etc. So it saves a bit of thread, helps make sure the machine stays threaded. All those good things. All right. Is that still put together correctly? Yes, I believe it is. Okay, this here. I think I'm missing something at the bottom. What are we missing? Something is not right. Oh, no, it's just that this needs to go together. Okay. See, this is why you got to go step by step, because it's going to look like something's messed up, and it's not. Just got to trust the process. Take it one step at a time. This is like the one place where these themes are going to meet. So I'm going to make sure that they're lined up. As they go through. Let's see. Debbie says, all my Maple sewing machines are down. I'm on one of my Singer 401s. Gave up on the quote frame for now. Slow wins for the quote raise. You got this. It's all about joy units. As long as you're having a good time and making progress on your projects, that's what matters. Okie dokie. There we go. See, because now this is going to go here. And again, this is one of those rare places where seams are going to line up. Unfortunately, the way that I press them, they're actually going to butt up against each other nicely. But I'm also going to drop a pin there. Okay. Y'all, this is looking so cool. I'm so excited. So excited. Dun, 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 dun. Now, as you're piecing this together, something that I want you to watch out for is if you start noticing that pieces are longer than they're supposed to be, right? Like if I had pieced this on, let me press this so y'all can see. Like if I had pieced this on, oh, y'all, that looks so cool. And we're not even done yet. And it hung off this edge over here, right? If that had happened with any of these pieces, then there are three things that I want you to check. The first thing that I want you to check is I want you to make sure that you grab the right piece. It is easy to mix up these pieces, all right? The second thing that I want you to check is I want you to check your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure that it's not like a lot wider or a lot narrower than 1/4 of an inch, okay? I've got one more place where these seams bump. So where I'm using pins on this is just where fabrics match and I need the lines to look continuous. Like here, you know, I want this line to look continuous, but it's made up of 2 pieces. That's where I'm dropping a pin. Okay, so check that 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like we were talking about. The final thing, and this will be tricky at this stage, but something to keep in mind for next time, is make sure that your cutting was accurate. Make sure that when you cut the width of these strips and the length of these strips, that they were just as the directions outlined. Because all of this should come out pretty much right flush to each other. Okay, a thread or 2 here or there is not a big deal. But if you're getting, you know, 1/4 of an inch difference, then something's up, okay? Now, the other question that I got that I promised that I would answer on this live is why in the cutting instructions did I have you guys count backwards, A4, A3, A2, A1, and cut that way instead of cutting A1, A2, A3, A4? Especially because then as we head into the pattern, I list them in numerical order, right? We started with A1 and went up from there. The reason for that was for efficiency in cutting, which we talked about quite a bit last week, that I want to start by cutting the longest pieces because then I was sometimes able to use those leftover bits from our strips to cut the smaller units, okay? So I wanted y'all to cut from the longest strips to the shortest strips to get the most efficiency out of your fabric. But when we're actually putting these together, it makes more sense to use the number order that we're all used to, right? You all ready for the big reveal? Ba-da-ba. And there's our block, okay? Except I'm holding it. Yeah, I'm holding it the right way. I'm seeing it reversed on the screen and confusing myself. So there it is. 1 block, 21 to go. So go get started on yours this week. And then next week, we'll talk a little bit more about pressing and we'll talk about all those partial blocks. All right? Does that sound like a good time? All right. Y'all, thank you so much for being here with me. Hopefully you gained a few tips about your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Hopefully this helps explain how to piece this block together. There is a lot going on with it. I know it is hard to visually see. Follow those directions carefully, step by step. It will come together. And then once we get all of our pieces sewn together after next week, I'll talk y'all through how to lay this out on the design wall so that all that pattern repeats all the way down our quilt. All right? Bye for now, y'all. I will see you next week, same time, same place. Have a good Wednesday.